While cleaning out my desk, my boss smirked and said, "Hey, leave the good supplies, it's not like you're going anywhere important, right?" I just nodded, packed my bag, and left the gold award he had secretly stolen from a former employee right on his desk, along with an anonymous tip to corporate ethics. The fallout was so much worse than I ever imagined. This happened about a year ago, and I still think about it at least once a week. I worked for a private architecture firm in Louisville, Kentucky for 7 years. It was one of those places where you either blend in and survive, or you try too hard and get chewed up. I was the quiet type. I came in on time, worked my projects, didn't get involved in the petty politics. I wasn't best friends with anyone, but I wasn't hated either. Clark Avery was my boss. One of those guys who thinks charm is the same thing as honesty. Always wearing a navy blazer, always adjusting his tie, always talking over people in meetings. He had that fake calm voice that made you feel like you were a kid being scolded at the principal's office, even when you weren't in trouble. I knew early on he didn't like me. I think it was because I never laughed at his jokes or sucked up to him. I didn't play his game. Still, I stuck it out. I worked hard. I was proud of my designs. I had a hand in 5 different public projects across the city. It meant something to me. Then came the community center contract. It was a huge deal for our firm. The city had opened up bids to a few local firms, and it was a chance to get a $5 million project. I was chosen to lead the design. I poured everything into it. Nights, weekends, even a few missed birthdays. I made sure it wasn't just another boxy city building. I worked in real green space, public art features, and a layout that encouraged community use. I even looped in an old buddy from college who teaches urban development at UK to look it over for free. I polished that proposal until I could see my reflection in it. I submitted it to Clark a week before the final pitch meeting. He said thanks without even looking up from his laptop. The next Monday, I found out I wasn't invited to the city presentation. My name wasn't mentioned. No email. Just radio silence. Then a day later, I saw it on the city's website. A photo of Clark in front of my design, smiling like a damn politician. The article quoted him saying it was his personal vision for what a city space should be. That was hard. But it wasn't the worst part. 2 days later, I got called into HR. They said my position was being eliminated due to budget constraints. No warning. No severance. Just a handshake and a cheap folder with Cobra info. As I cleaned out my desk, trying not to let my hands shake too much, Clark strolled by with that smug little grin of his. He looked down at the box I was packing and said, "Hey, leave the good supplies, it's not like you're going anywhere important, right?" I didn't say a word. Just nodded and kept packing. But before I left, I did something that had been sitting in the back of my mind for months. See, one afternoon about 6 months earlier, I was digging through the locked supply cabinet. Clark's personal one, looking for an old drawing set. I found it open and unattended. Inside, under some dusty blueprints, I found a gold plaque. It was an award. American Institute of Architects, Gold Merit for Public Design Excellence, awarded to Travis Monroe. That stopped me cold. Travis had been a project lead before me. He left suddenly 3 years ago, right after a big project that got statewide praise. There were whispers that he'd cracked under pressure. The official story was personal reasons. But now I was holding his award. And Clark had it hidden in his cabinet. I took a picture with my phone and put the plaque back exactly how I found it. Back then, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get dragged into something I couldn't prove. But now, as I was carrying my box out of the office, I knew exactly what to do. I walked into Clark's office while he was in the break room, slid the plaque out of my bag, and laid it right in the middle of his desk. Face up. Next to his gold Mont Blanc pen. Then I left. But not before sitting in my car for 10 minutes and submitting an anonymous complaint to the corporate ethics department. I uploaded the photo. I explained what I'd found. I included a few documents I'd quietly kept. Things I noticed over the years, like projects being billed for hours nobody worked, or signed off inspections that were never done. I didn't think anything would come of it. Corporate usually just sweeps this stuff under the rug. I figured maybe he'd get a warning or a slap on the wrist. I was so wrong. The fallout started small, a few quiet calls to people I still talked to inside the firm. Then it got louder. First, there was the sudden email that went out from HR about a third-party audit being conducted by headquarters. Apparently, corporate sent 2 people from the main office in Chicago to review internal compliance practices. That's code for someone screwed up bad. 3 days after that, Clark's door was closed all day. That never happened. He was the type who liked being seen, liked being in control. So when someone told me he'd been pulled into a 6-hour meeting with the auditors and one of the ethics lawyers, I knew the ball had started rolling. What I didn't expect was how fast everything else would come out. Turns out, the stolen award was just the tip of the iceberg. A week after I filed the complaint, someone else, I still don't know who, came forward. They gave corporate even more proof that Clark had been funneling design credits to himself for years. Multiple projects had his name listed as lead designer when he hadn't drawn a single line. But the worst part? That community center project I worked so hard on, the one Clark took credit for, he screwed it up. He made changes after I submitted the design. Cheap ones. Tried to cut corners and add last-minute features to impress the mayor. Things like a rooftop greenhouse with no structural support and a sustainable water system that wasn't up to code. The city planning office caught it. They flagged it. And when they pushed for answers, Clark couldn't give them. That opened the floodgates. I heard from a former coworker, let's call her Rachel, who'd worked in accounting. She told me corporate had frozen all of Clark's access, including his email and badge. He was walked out by security before lunch on a Tuesday. No goodbye speech. No notice. Just gone. But that wasn't even the big twist. Because remember Travis Monroe? The guy whose award Clark had hidden? Well, Travis came back. Apparently, someone from ethics reached out to him after my tip. They wanted to confirm the award was really his. Not only did he confirm it, he had kept every email, every original sketch, every draft of the project Clark stole. Travis had tried to fight back then, but Clark buried him. Lied to HR, manipulated reports, and made him look unstable. Travis was forced out under mental health concerns and had to move out of state to start fresh. Now he was back. And he wasn't quiet. Travis filed a formal grievance with the state licensing board. And that board launched its own investigation into Clark's architectural license. Which, by the way, turned out to be full of holes, missing credits, expired certifications, even some questionable references on his resume from people who turned out to be dead or unreachable. Corporate couldn't cover it up. It was too big now. Clark was not only fired. He was disbarred from practicing architecture in the state of Kentucky. And because he'd used public funds on the community center project and faked parts of the paperwork, the city filed charges. Fraud. Misrepresentation. Misuse of government resources. He was arrested. But the fallout didn't stop with Clark. Because the firm, my former firm, had to do damage control. The city pulled 3 active projects from them. Investors bailed. Clients canceled contracts. Within 2 months, the firm was downsizing hard. Whole teams let go. Partners forced into early retirement. And then one day, I got a call. It was from Travis. He thanked me. Said he knew I was the one who exposed the truth, even if I hadn't signed my name. He said something that stuck with me, you didn't just get justice for yourself. You got it for everyone he buried. But even that wasn't the end. Because karma had one more twist waiting. I thought it was over. Thought Clark was out of the picture for good and maybe, just maybe, I could move on. Maybe find a new job, clear my head, stop waking up every night thinking about that damn smirk. But then I got a message I never expected. It came from a burner email address. No subject line. Just one sentence, "You think you're clean in all this?" At first, I thought it was spam. Or maybe Clark, trying to rattle me from wherever he was sitting, probably out on bail. But the next day, I got another one. This one had an attachment. A screenshot of a company memo. My name was on it. It looked like an internal billing form, one of those standard project time sheets we filled out for city jobs. Except this one had a problem. It showed me signing off on 12 hours of design work for a project I never worked on. A project that was under federal funding. I stared at it for a long time. I knew what it was. Clark. That bastard had used my name to sign off on ghost hours. Maybe once, maybe more. I'd never seen that document. But it was in the system, and now someone was using it. I started digging. Quietly. Reached out to Rachel again. Asked her if she could check the internal logs. She was hesitant but agreed. What she found made my stomach twist. There were 5 entries under my name across 3 different projects. All signed during times when I'd been on other assignments. One of them was during a week I was out sick with the flu. I had the PTO request to prove it. It was clear now. Clark hadn't just stolen credit. He'd covered his tracks using me. Maybe because I was quiet. Maybe because I didn't ask questions. Or maybe because he knew I'd never look. But now it was in the system. I panicked. I didn't want to get dragged down with him. I contacted the corporate ethics board again, this time not anonymously. I showed them everything. The emails, the fake logs, my PTO dates, even my saved drafts that proved I wasn't on those projects. They believed me. Sort of. They launched a second wave of internal investigations. This one focusing on the backdated logs and who else Clark had used. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. 3 others had their names forged on billing sheets. One of them had already gotten a warning letter from the city. They were about to be investigated for fraud too. That stopped things cold. Corporate went into full-on defense mode. They hired a crisis firm. Tried to pin it all on Clark. But the city wasn't playing anymore. Because now the feds were involved. Apparently, at least one of those projects had Department of Transportation money in it. Federal grant funds. Which meant forged documents weren't just a firm problem, they were a federal crime. And guess whose name was on 3 of them? Mine. Even though I'd never touched those projects, I was now a person of interest. I had to get a lawyer. Not the cheap kind. The kind that eats $400 an hour and doesn't smile much. He told me flat out. You need to clear this up, or you could be looking at a federal fraud investigation. I sat in my living room that night, holding my phone, staring at that original burner email. You think you're clean in all this? That wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And it wasn't from Clark. Because Clark was already locked up. No, this was someone else. Someone inside the firm. Someone who knew. The final piece of the puzzle came from someone I never expected to hear from. Haley. She was Clark's executive assistant. Been with him for over 5 years. Everyone thought she was just a quiet admin who kept her head down. But she saw everything. She called me late one night. No small talk. Just said, I think you need to see this, and sent me a zip file through a secure email. Inside were scans of notebooks, receipts, backup emails, even voicemails Clark had left on her burner phone. It was proof. Not just that he forged my name, but that he had a system. A whole setup where he used certain employees as shields, listing our names on shady billing, using us as scapegoats in case anything went wrong. He even said it, in one of the voicemails, if this falls apart, I've got my backups. I mean, who's gonna believe my name over me? He's nobody. I sent it all to my lawyer. He forwarded it straight to the federal investigators. A week later, I was cleared. Completely. They issued a formal statement saying I was used without my knowledge, that my identity had been misused by a now indicted party. My name was off the record. But the damage wasn't done yet. I still had to deal with what Clark left behind, the mess, the fear, the stress that hadn't let me sleep for months. I wanted it to be over. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I made a choice. I called a reporter. The Courier-Journal had been covering the community center mess from the start. I offered them a full interview, on record, and gave them every document I had. Every file. Every photo. Every sick little piece of the truth. They ran it as a Sunday feature, the fall of a fraud, how one architect used his co-workers to build his empire, and got burned, it blew up. They printed the award photo front and center. They printed Clark's quote from the voicemail. They quoted Travis. They even included a timeline of the forged documents. But the kicker? They included the memo that had my forged signature on it. Right next to a red circle showing the exact date I was out sick, with a doctor's note. Just to drive it home. Clark's name became poison in the industry. He lost his house, his cars, his retirement. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The trial went public. And in front of a packed courtroom, while the city attorney read out the charges, wire fraud, falsifying public records, identity theft, Clark didn't even look up. He sat there hollow, beaten, like all that charm had just rotted away. He took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison. No parole. As for me? I moved to Cincinnati. Started over. Got hired by a firm that actually values the work, not just the politics. It wasn't easy. I still have nightmares sometimes. Still wake up thinking I'm going to be blamed for something I didn't do. But I sleep better knowing this. Clark thought he could bury me, just like he buried Travis, and probably others before us. He thought he was untouchable. But he forgot one thing. When you spend your life stepping on people, eventually one of them's going to reach up and drag you down with them. And I made damn sure I did.